Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today we're talking about the biggest news in Marvel Future Fight in about 6 months. And I'm not exaggerating for once. It's not clickbait or anything like that. We got a post on Twitter, followed up by a post on Mobirum that people have been kind of losing their minds about since. And it is the first hint at a major piece of content, and I put content in kind of air quotations, for the Infinity War update, Tier 3. Now, for those of you who may not know what Tier 3 is referring to or what T3 refers to, there are basically two tiers of characters in the game right now. The first tier refers to 1-star to 6-star characters level 60, which are characters like Colossus. But all characters in the game now come with the ability to go up to Tier 2, which is where they get their Tier 2 passive from. Their Tier 2 passive can also enhance their 4-star passive. It can also rarely change some of their skills. And also it can enhance, in some rare cases, their leadership. But mostly it's for that additional passive effect. On top of Tier 1 and Tier 2, there are some characters who come in as native Tier 2s. They're kind of Tier 2.5 because although they are native Tier 2 and they don't need to be ascended the way that Tier 1s do, their cost is much more expensive in the form of different resources like Black Antimatter or Phoenix Feathers and the crystals and the Chaos Nornstones, but also because they have higher base stats. And so the introduction of Tier 3 to the existing ecosystem of this game is a massive undertaking, and it is potentially quite threatening but also exciting. So I do want to give you my realistic take on what Tier 3 means for the game, for your accounts and your rosters at this point in the journey that is Marvel Future Fight. But I also want to invest and kind of inject my excitement because this has the opportunity to really shake things up, and that's exactly what we need. But let's just really quickly cover what was said. So I'll show you first the Twitter post, which is what I saw first. It's got some interesting graphics here with documents. It's got top secret, Tier 3 protocol, very obvious what they're referring to. This is slang specifically for the game, for Marvel Future Fight. It's not in the MCU, it's not in any other game. You've got Captain America's shield, which will be important, and then it ties into the teaser text. The serum, referring to the super soldier serum that Steve Rogers was injected with during World War II, is continuing to affect his body. He's still changing. So that's the idea of getting more powerful, getting stronger, evolving in some way. And it's very important that they chose, where is he? It's very important that they chose Captain America for this teaser, because if you rewind 2 years ago, we're going back 2 years, guys, Captain America was among the first to get a Tier 2 passive. Now, originally his Tier 2 passive was much worse than the one you're seeing right now. It's been updated since it was released, but he was among the first introduced with the original world bosses, Proxima, Corvus, and Black Dwarf. He was among the first heroes to get a Tier 2 passive, so it's very fitting, it's very kind of mirroring that 2 years ago when they introduced Thanos' children and the Black Order and the Infinity Gauntlet, that they also introduced for the good guys to power up your teams the ability to Tier 2 characters like Captain America, Falcon, War Machine, Winter Soldier, Black Widow. Now, you'll remember, and you might not, those characters were terrible when they were Tier 2, and they were actually still weaker than a lot of Tier 1 characters that we had, like Loki and Kingpin. So the same is potentially true now for this new Tier 3, and that's the first thing I want you to think about, is the history of it. Chances are we're not going to be getting, and this is just my speculation, but the chances are we're not going to be getting 157 Tier 3 upgrades available as soon as the update goes live. That would just be that would take months for them to balance and test 157 passives or whatever new kind of power is going to come out of these Tier 3s, because they have to be some kind of increased power. Either we're going to get a new passive effect to go along with the 4-star passive and the Tier 2 passive, we're going to get a secondary leadership that applies when you're a teammate but not a leader, like they do in DC Unchained, for example. It could be a 6th skill, but I really doubt it. The screen is already quite cluttered with all of the skills plus the co-op button. There's really nowhere else for it to go unless it changes the auto attack skill, unless the auto attack skill changes to something else, or it's some kind of like Omega mode where the character like evolves mid-battle and it changes all of their skills around. There's a couple of different ways they can go with it, but wherever they go with it, they're not going to be able to do it to 150 plus characters in one update. So this is kind of the foreseeable future of the game's updates, and that is both good and bad. It's potentially extremely good, but it's potentially quite dry and dull. And I think the thing that has people worried the most is that we're getting this, and that's all we're getting. And that's kind of where I doubt it, because when 2 years ago when we got the update for tier 2s, and that kind of got everyone up in arms, what do you mean I have to do something past 6-starring my characters? A lot of the language that people used back then 2 years ago to express their fear and their kind of worry and anxiety about having to go higher than 6 stars, level 60 mastery, is being echoed now. I got all my characters to tier 2. Why do you want me to go and do it again and do more of it? I want my roster to stay the way it is. It's too much work. I can't do it. I'm gonna quit. You'll be fine, okay? People were fine 2 years ago. You'll be fine now. Chances are Netmarble is going to make it a lot easier to tier 2 characters even faster, and it's already extremely easy given how frequently you can get Black Antimatter, Chaos Norn Stones, and tier 2 tickets. They're giving away more and more, you know, as we speak. But in addition to that, I want you to remember that when we got the tier 2 characters, we got the challenge bar for World Boss, and that was eventually added on with World Boss Ultimate. But World Boss was a major source of exciting content. It was challenging, it was rewarding, it gave us a place where we could really test our characters and see just who had what it took and who wasn't good enough, and how you could craft your characters in different ways, and you could craft different teams to really tackle the problem, you know. As much as it might have been difficult to do World Boss at the time, because of challenges like Black Dwarf, you had people coming up with ideas, the community rallying behind strategies like Warwolf, Daisy, plus 1 damage character like Iron Fist or Proxima, and then you buff, you tag, you buff again, you tag, and you just burst them down for maximum damage, and you have to position yourself perfectly, you gotta time everything, and it's gotta be spot on, and you win, or you make a mistake and you lose. So there's really a lot that is potentially in store for us, content-wise, to go along with this new push to tier 3. I have hopes, and I am optimistic that Netmarble recognizes that characters as content is not enough. I've seen so many people in the comment sections on Mobirum, Reddit, and Twitter all saying we need game modes, we need game modes. So I really do think, and I hope, that Netmarble knows that, and that as much effort as they're putting into this tier 3 balancing, they're going to also put it into the actual content that we're going to use those tier 3 characters in, because it's a really good point that people are making. But if none of the content in the game gets more difficult, there's no reason to get any tier 3 characters. So at the very worst, all of your worrying about tier 3ing will be pointless, because you won't have to tier 3 characters unless you really want them, unless you really love them, if none of the game modes change or get harder. And if they do, bring on the challenge. Additionally, the opportunity to tier 3 a character gives Netmarble the chance, and again, this is a big piece of optimism and hope and trust that I'm kind of blindly putting into Netmarble, but it gives them a chance to once again rebalance existing characters. While they definitely missed the mark with a lot of existing characters, there are a lot of weak characters that are just underwhelming right now. They did buff quite a lot of characters by giving them their tier 2 passive when they had none. So it's definitely something that remains to be seen, and something that I hope they can rectify. You know, they should recognize that Yellow Jacket shouldn't get as good of a tier 3 buff as, let's say, Sister Grimm, because on average Yellow Jacket is much stronger than Sister Grimm. Conversely, Miles Morales needs a much stronger tier 3 buff than Spider-Man 2099 or Spider-Man. So I really am looking forward to seeing what kinds of buffs or what kinds of changes they make to existing characters to try and even out the battlefield. We've got a lot of characters that need love, and this is basically their swan song for them getting a buff. It didn't happen with rebalancing. They're going to get tier 3s, all of them eventually. Let's see what Netmarble does. A couple of lingering questions I have, and I'll cover in a second, but I just want to go back now and talk just very briefly about the teaser on Mobirum, because the teaser on Mobirum goes into a little bit more detail. It talks about Nick Fury and Black Widow discussing the new training regimen for Captain America. They call it the Tier 3 protocol. They throw in a few hints about unlocking new powers, previously undetected inner powers, some kind of secure document, etc. So this could mean a couple of different things. It could mean that you need to get some new resources in order to unlock the powers of this character, which means every character is tier 2. It could be that the Infinity Stones are going to factor in somehow into upgrading these characters to tier 3. I made a joke on the live stream that you're going to have to sacrifice other characters to tier 3 existing characters, like you got to kill Captain America and delete him from your roster in order to tier 3 Falcon as the new Captain America. Again, there's a lot of different ways they can go with this. Additionally, there is the question of what they do or what they will do about existing native tier 2 characters like the powerful X-Men, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Cable, Apocalypse, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Doctor Strange, Odin, Dormammu, etc. It's a good question, and I don't really have an answer for it. My rationale, or what I'm thinking, is that they'll leave those characters for the end, because they're obviously the ones that need buffs the least. Aside from the Black Order, who are probably going to get uniforms, aside from Odin and Dormammu, all of the other native tier 2s are extremely powerful, and they're among the top characters in the game. Additionally, the Ultimates, Ant-Man, Nova, and Blue Marvel don't really need tier 3 buffs anytime soon. So I really hope that Netmarble recognizes who needs them first the most, especially characters that tie into Infinity War, like Nebula, Gamora, Captain America, and Iron Man. Those characters really need a lot of love. If they start giving love to characters like Doctor Strange, who, yeah, he's in Infinity War, or Thor, who's also in Infinity War, those characters really don't need buffs or, you know, improvements nearly as much as some of those other characters, Winter Soldier, War Machine, that I've already mentioned. So we'll definitely have to wait until we see the patch notes, but to see and to finally identify how much Netmarble is going to change things and shake things up, and who they're going to be targeting first, will really give us a better idea of how much they've thought about and carefully planned this update. If they're just picking the strong characters and characters that are easy to buff, it's probably not going to be a good sign. But if they're hand-picking specific characters that both fit thematically and also need buffs, then we'll be in for potentially one of the best updates ever in Marvel Future Fight. A couple of final things I want to leave off for you guys. The actual documents that they use in the teaser images, you might try to uncover the secrets of what it says on the document, but I will save you the time and the Photoshop kind of amateur sleuthing. Some really smart people in my Twitch chat figured out that it's actually just a copy-paste of an existing declassified document from the Cuban Missile Crisis between the American government and Cuba in I believe 62. So it's a real document. It's you know, involving things that actually happened in reality, and they just made it look like it had to do with Marvel Future Fight and that kind of stuff. Lastly, having to do with the text that's in the Mobirum teaser about a new training regimen that Captain America does to unlock his potential. This idea is something that was presented to me by someone in the Twitch chat, and I just loved it, and so I wanted to share it with you guys, get your opinions on it. And if anyone at Netmarble is listening and there's still time to change things and you're not doing this, please strongly consider doing this. The idea of a training regimen, the idea of Captain America working himself to unlock his tier 3 potential, is something that would be so wonderful to have illustrated and reflected in this game through a game mode. Picture it like a mini epic quest. And what it essentially does, it says, you know, you got your Captain America. You want a tier 3 Captain America? Okay, you got to kill Infinity Thanos with Captain America. He needs to do at least 85% of the team's damage. He has to use his own leadership, and you have to do it in less than 3 minutes. And you got to do it 10 times. And that's the first phase of Captain America's tier 3. And so rather than collecting resources, rather than paying money or paying crystals to just fast track your way through these requirements to get your character stronger, if they actually made us all work, regardless of whether we're kind of paying players, whales or guppies or shrimp or dolphins or free-to-play or whatever, if they made it about an actual training that you're doing in-game, that you don't just auto-play, simulate, that you're actually playing and grinding and winning with that character, it's gonna obviously make tier 3s much harder to obtain, which is fine, because we know we're not going to get them all in one shot. We're only going to get maybe 10 for this first update, but it's going to make them feel so much more valuable. And each one that you do is like, man, I'm going to invest the next 2 weeks of my time playing this game to tier 3 this character, because I have to focus so much, and I have to build up all of their Uru and their Obelisk and their IS weight set. I got a Mythic as uniform because I need to get him to tier 3. So I have to do all these other things to max him out, and then start focusing on the tier 3 kind of regiment, test, challenges, tasks. And that's just amazing. And I think that would be probably the purest and the most fun way of making these tier 3s fair and making them connected to content that we have in the game, and also new content, and making it a long-term goal that we can have for characters, to give Netmarble, you know, a bunch of updates in the future that they can do to just introduce more tier 3s, and also for us to rebalance existing characters that have kind of slowed down and aren't as powerful anymore. So personally, when I think of things in that way, I become just ecstatic, lightning, electrified with excitement for what this update could hold. Of course, I'm just speculating, guys, so it's possible that it could be something totally different, but we'll have to wait and see, and hopefully remain optimistic. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Can't wait to hear all of the mixed opinions. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.